Right, back live tonight, you're on In Focus. Another top judge faces a possible impeachment as the Judicial Conduct Committee mulls over a complaint brought by former Judge President John Hlophe. He is accusing retired Chief Justice Mogoeng Mogoeng of conducting himself improperly when he dealt with a complaint against him by Deputy Judge President Patricia Goliath. Judges Matters researcher Mbekezeli Benjamin joins us now for more on that. Mbekezeli, good to have you and thank you very much for your time. Seems this is a matter that I suppose could take us back to 2019 or maybe even 2020 or allegations of gross misconduct on the part of the former Chief Justice Mogoeng Mogoeng. What is the nature of the complaint?
Good evening, Mr. Mdluli, and good evening to the viewers. The nature of the complaint really is that Dr. Hlophe accuses Justice Mogoeng Mogoeng of acting dishonestly, and in so doing, he has violated the Code of Conduct for Judges. And this arises out of a complaint that was filed in January of 2020. So Judge Patricia Goliath of the Western Cape High Court filed a complaint against then Judge President Hlophe, accusing him of misconduct. And in what I can only see as retaliation, Judge Hlophe filed counter complaints against both Judge Goliath and Justice Mogoeng. And essentially what he says is that before the 2020 complaint was filed, Justice Mogoeng had met with Judge Goliath, and they discussed this complaint. And later on, Justice Mogoeng presided over some of the issues relating to the complaint by Goliath against Hlophe, and in so doing, he acted dishonestly, and that is the basis of the complaint. And of course, dishonest conduct is one of the most serious allegations that can be put to a judge, and which is likely why the Judicial Conduct Committee recommended that this go to a tribunal.
So key here is whether or not October 11th, 2019, there was a secret meeting. Do you think this particular matter would revolve around that particular fact?
Look, to be quite honest, at the time at which this meeting was alleged to have happened, it was the time when Justice Goliath had recently, I think, finished a stint acting at the Constitutional Court. And at that point, she would have interacted quite closely with Justice Mogoeng. And so I'm not 100% sure how then it rises to the level of a secret meeting. And I'm also not quite sure how it rises also to being dishonest or secretive conduct on the part of Justice Mogoeng. The other element to this is that the substance of the meeting or what was discussed in the meeting is allegedly issues that were later ventilated in the complaint. So the allegation is that, allegation from Dr. Hlophe's side is that Justice Mogoeng sort of incited Justice Goliath to file a complaint. And in that situation, it's also quite hard to conclude that Justice Mogoeng acted improperly because, as you recall, at that time he was the head of the judiciary, and this was a deputy in one of the most important divisions in the country coming to him and raising concerns about what is happening in the division. So for me, it makes sense, and I don't see quite how it gets to dishonest conduct.
Yeah, but does expressing a view that says file a complaint equate to expressing a partial view towards Judge Goliath? One. The second thing that I believe is raised in the complaint is that there was a counter-complaint that was then dismissed without giving it a proper ventilation, saying that in itself shows that the partial view expressed earlier would have been a continuation in this particular matter. And the Chief Justice then would have known that automatically he should have disqualified himself from adjudicating this particular complaint filed.
Well, I think let's separate the two. I'll deal with the second part of your question later, but the first part on whether Justice Mogoeng saying to Judge Goliath that she must file a complaint is something that shows that he takes a partial view. My view is that it is not. The reason why is because if a senior judge comes to the head of the judiciary and says to them, these are the concerns that are happening in my division, I don't know what to do. What should I do? And the head of the judiciary says, actually, go through this formal process, submit a complaint, let it be investigated, and the outcome will be what it is. And that is exactly what happened, because shortly after the October 2019 meeting, in January of 2020, the complaint was filed. And so in my view, I don't see that Justice Mogoeng acted improperly in the circumstances.
Is the impartiality, the impartiality in dismissing the counter complaint and immediately sending the initial complaint to for the tribunal?
So again, that's where I was getting to, is that the complaint, who dismissed it? And this is important because after the complaint was filed by Justice Goliath, it went to the Judicial Conduct Committee. The Judicial Conduct Committee is, of course, made up of senior judges, and at least 3 of them need to be involved in any decision relating to a complaint. In this particular case, the 3 judges who were involved were Judge Mujapilo, Judge Zondi, and Judge Dambuza, and they concluded that that complaint against Judge Hlophe must go to a tribunal. That decision was a recommendation from the Judicial Conduct Committee to the JSC. The JSC, sitting without the members of Parliament, concluded that yes, this complaint must go to a judicial conduct tribunal. And that was the way that the complaint proceeded. The counter complaint that Judge Hlophe filed against Judge Goliath, that again went to the Judicial Conduct Committee. The JCC said, yes, this must also go to a tribunal. But the JSC, the commission, said that no, this part of the complaint, there is not enough substantiation for it to go to a tribunal, and so we declined the recommendation that it go to a tribunal, and they dismissed it. So at each of those points, the decision was really taken by several members of the judiciary, including at the JSC level. So it wouldn't have been influenced by Justice Mogoeng acting alone. It would have been other judges who took the decision, and which is why, again, this current complaint to say that he sort of acted improperly in involving himself in this complaint, I don't quite see how it gets to that point.
So then the last part, the automatic disqualification from adjudicating a complaint, if indeed the 2 conditions mentioned earlier would have been met, if there was a secret meeting, if express partiality would have been the case, and there was impartiality in dismissing the counter complaint.
Well, in that situation, those issues are what the Judicial Conduct Committee at this point has said need to be investigated by a tribunal, because it does seem that if there is any substantiation to the allegations, then at this point, then Justice Mogoeng would have acted improperly. And so the decision, again, lies with the Judicial Service Commission. The JCC makes a recommendation, and the commission itself makes a final determination on it. And like I said, a previous complaint, the counter complaint by Judge Hlophe, was considered by the JSC and was dismissed. The likelihood that this one will go ahead, I see it as very slim, but of course it is a decision of the JSC.
So the JSC, are you saying it's going through the motions, I suppose, that we've got this, let's investigate it, chances of it being a success are slim to none, but at least let it go through the process?
So that is, in fact, the complexity in the current system of judicial complaints, the mechanism itself. It starts off as a complaint to the Judicial Conduct Committee. the committee then makes a determination, a prima facie finding. So it's called a prima facie finding or preliminary finding because it is simply based on what has been submitted before the JCC. There is no witnesses, there is no testimony, no cross-examination. They then decide whether a tribunal is needed. The tribunal is where there will be cross-examination and witnesses. But they make a recommendation to the JSC on the appointment of the tribunal. It is ultimately the JSC, the commission, that takes the decision on the tribunal. And in this case, it is now up to the JSC to decide on whether a tribunal is needed based on the recommendation that has been made.
So who is the JSC sitting on this particular matter now?
So the JSC that decides on this is the 13 members of the 23-member body. You'll remember the JSC is made up of 23 members. 10 of them are members of parliament. When it decides complaints against judges, the 10 members of parliament do not sit in the JSC. So that means it will be the judges who are members of the JSC, the lawyers, so advocates and attorneys, the Minister of Justice, and the law professor. So those will be part of this decision on whether or not to institute a tribunal that will investigate Justice Mogoeng.
Is it at this stage an impeachable inquiry or an impeachment inquiry, if you like?
So for it to get to the tribunal stage, the JCC must make a prima facie finding on whether or not this is an impeachable complaint. So the categories that are there in terms of the JSC Act are a non-serious complaint, which is the lowest category. The second category is serious but non-impeachable complaint. And then the most serious, which is the third category, is impeachable complaints. So those are complaints if a judge is found guilty of, then the likelihood is the impeachment process running. But so this case falls into that third category because it involves dishonesty, and that is the finding that was made by the Judicial Conduct Committee.
Yeah. How do they weight these? Well, what do you base the gravity of a matter on?
That's a really important question because that is something that we have not seen a lot of consistency in how this is done. The Judicial Conduct Committee sometimes relies on previous decisions, so previous precedent of how complaints were dealt with, but often it looks at what is the nature of the complaint. So what are the specific circumstances that are involved and how serious is the misconduct? You'll recall that there were judges in Gauteng that were sent to the tribunal for not delivering judgment. In that instance, the JCC, the committee, decided that they were serious enough to warrant a tribunal investigation. There's another case that involves another Gauteng judge where she is alleged to have been involved improperly in a state-owned company. That is a complaint that also has been deemed to be impeachable. But there are other complaints where the JCC said that it's not serious enough to warrant an impeachment, but it warrants an inquiry. And those complaints, we call them Section 17 complaints, which may not lead to impeachment, but they are still quite serious. So it really depends on the nature of the complaint.
Yeah. A most serious complaint is what we are dealing with here. So what is expected in terms of response from former Chief Justice Mogoeng Mogoeng? A denial of all allegations, would that just be enough, or is there a little bit more that is expected in that response?
Yes, so in terms of the JSC Act, the commission, the Judicial Service Commission, will invite both Dr. Hlophe and Justice Mogoeng to make submissions on this recommendation that has been made by the Judicial Conduct Committee. So they will make submissions on whether this should go to a tribunal or not, and then they will obviously motivate why this should go to a tribunal or why it shouldn't. And then it is up to the JSC commissioners who will then decide whether this should go to a tribunal, whether it has been substantiated enough to go to a tribunal or whether it can be dismissed.
Mbekezeli Benjamin, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on and that explanation for us there, researcher at Judges Matters.